Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in our long running series of the 52 must see movies and why they matter. All of the films that we've been talking about are from this book here that is put out by Turner Classic Movies, written by James Arnold and is Jeremy Arnold, and and with a foreword by the late great Robert Osborne, the longtime host, the longtime champion of classic movies. So we are here once again to discuss another of these movies, and it's a bit of a big one. It's a bit of one that I think a lot of people have heard of. Most people, I hope, have seen, and that is Sunset Boulevard from 1950, directed by Billy Wilder, starring William Holden, Gloria Swanson, and Eric von Stroheim. We're going to be discussing this film in great length, spoiling the heck out of it. So please, if you haven't seen this movie, I really hope you would watch it before you would watch this, because I think it's best to go into this one specifically knowing the least amount possible, because it is one that I think people need to experience very fresh for the first time, because it's a much different film than I think a lot of people know about. But I'm joined here once again by my friend Stephen Billings.
How you guys doing? Yeah, this is a good one. This is a really good one. This is a movie that really it is a what today people would say is really a Hollywood film. It's a movie that really talks of and comments on Hollywood, and them are the movies that they love. They love these type of movies. So, but back then it was a little bit like wait, they're talking about us in a bad way, kind of like, no, what?
Yeah, I know. Hollywood is image conscious. Who knew? Who knew? An industry that is all about aesthetics would be worried about the image and the sheen on Tinseltown. There's a reason why they call it Tinseltown, because a lot of it's not real, you know. And this film comments on a lot of the unrealness that is in Hollywood, and that is still very much in Hollywood today. But starting off in this film, for those of you who have not seen it, is centered around the character portrayed by William Holden. I call him Bill Holden because we're best friends apparently. And his character's name is Joe Gillis, and he is a writer, but he's not a successful writer. He's kind of somebody who just writes B pictures and tries desperately to get his script sold so that he can make some money. And that is kind of very indicative of I think, how a lot of people live in Hollywood. They're just trying to sell their stuff. And it's probably more difficult now than it was back in 1950 or the late 40s, when there's much less people there trying to do that. You know, you go to California to fulfill your dream of working in the pictures somehow. But William Holden is very much like that, because he comes from like a small Midwest town. I can't remember the name of it, but he worked at like his local newspaper, and he decided to go west and try to pursue his dream of working in Hollywood. And things are not working out for him at all. The film starts off right away with these guys come to his apartment to repossess his car because he can't make the payments. So he decides he actually hid his car away so they can't find it. He's kind of a shifty guy in general, but we'll get to that. But so he decides to take his car and go around town to see if he can find some money. You know, he goes to the studio to see what they think about his script. They think his script sucks. He meets the woman who is a reader. Basically, it's her job to read all of the possible scripts that are going to be turned into movies, and her job is to see whether they're worth it or not, whether they're good or not. You know, she writes up summaries about them, about her feelings about them. So she comes in the office and she says, "Yeah, that script I read, yeah, it sucks." And he's like, "Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks for telling me." So he goes around town trying to find some money from his agent won't give him money. His friend, who is an assistant director, he can't get a hold of. It's a mess for him. So he's like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go back to the Midwest, back to my medial paying job, but at least I'll be okay. But what ends up happening is he ends up coincidentally running into those guys who were trying to repossess his car earlier, and he drives away from them. It's not quite a high speed chase, but he drives away from them, and his tire blows out. And his tire just happens to blow out very near this old, almost abandoned looking mansion. and it's supposed to be, in the Hollywood Hills. Sunset Boulevard, for those of you who don't know it, is pretty much where all of the stars live, or at least a lot of the stars live. They live all the way up in the Hollywood Hills, kind of away from the city. And he comes across this place and he thinks it's abandoned. He's like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave this car here, and I'll take a bus or whatever back to the Midwest, and I'll send these guys a postcard telling them where they can pick up this car. But come to find out, the house is occupied. And it's occupied by two people. One is Gloria Swanson's character, who is Norma Desmond. And Norma Desmond, come to find out, is someone who used to be a star of the silent era in Hollywood. She worked at Paramount, and she kind of made that studio what it is at that time. And unfortunately, she's kind of a little crazy upstairs. And she also lives with her butler, who is portrayed by Eric von Stroheim, who pretty much just does whatever she wants and just kind of caters to her every need because, like I said, there's something not quite right upstairs with her. And when we first meet her, it's evident. It is obvious. And one of the first lines, one of the most, iconic lines where he recognizes, he's like, haven't I seen you before? Oh, that's right. You're Norma Desmond. That's a silent movie star. You used to be big. And then this is where we get one of the most famous lines in all of movie history. And it's like, I'm still big. It's the pictures that got smaller. And that's one of the first lines you hear from her. And you're like, okay, there's something a little crazy going on behind the scenes here. And this film ends up kind of taking off from that point into a very interesting psychological film that's a lot about social commentary about Hollywood and what Hollywood does to people and how it takes them, manipulates them, gets as much as they can out of them. It kind of throws them away. And it's very interesting from that perspective. It's one of my favorite films of all time. Every time I watch it, I'm just amazed at how much a mainstream Hollywood film at the time could get away with saying what it's saying. The screenplay, I think, is really tight. The movie, I believe, is like 2 hours long, an hour and 50 minutes, but I think it moves incredibly well. Every scene, in my opinion, really counts. Steven, I know you liked the film as well, so what do you have to say?
Yeah, going back a little bit to where we, talking about him as a screenwriter, I really like the stuff it comments on there where he's a guy that is trying to be very creative and he's trying to write these original scripts, but they keep turning down his really original stuff. So he tries to write more conventional Hollywood stuff that he thinks will sell, and they don't like that stuff either. And it's like, he's either being too conventional or he's being too overly creative. And that's kind of a comment on Hollywood where it's like, you can't win. You can't. Yeah. It's like you have to be already in the studio system and the people that have things that have the power to really get anything going. And it's like you have to be lucky.
Yeah, his script that he wanted to get made was called Bases Loaded. And basically this young like hotshot baseball player is batting 357 on the season. He's a high batting average, he's doing great, right? But he gets involved with the mob, and I guess like the mob want him to not hit as well, or maybe take a dive. And it's comment on kind of, I guess, sports betting and stuff like that. And they don't. And he wanted Alan Ladd to play the main character, who was a famous player, actor of the time, Alan Ladd. But yeah, it's just very interesting how inside baseball, not to be punished here, how inside baseball this film is when they're referencing, they're talking about a lot of actors working at the time or were popular at the time. So you're getting a lot of name dropping. But when the film kind of bridges from that point on, the bulk of this film is William Holden is working for the Norma Desmond character, doing some rewrites on this really long, extremely lavish and bloated, probably terrible script that she has written, starring herself, of course, because there's no star bigger than her, at least in her mind. And he is kind of a bit of her I don't know, what's the word, Steven? Gigolo?
Lapdog.
Yeah, very interesting is that Yeah, one actor I think they wanted for this film was Fred MacMurray to play the William Holden role, and Fred MacMurray said, "Yeah, I can't see myself playing a gigolo or something like that." And I'm like, that's kind of what this role is. It's kind of what at least this character morphs into. Initially, he's just doing it for the free ride because there's this large lavish house. He doesn't have to pay for anything. She takes him out to stores to buy him clothes. Granted, these clothes are, 20 years at least or 30 years out of fashion. She's buying him older clothes because in her mind, she still hasn't left the silent era. You know what I mean? In her mind, things should be where they should be. Right away when we meet her, she's commenting on how terrible talkies are. Like, oh, they took away all the stars, like Douglas Fairbanks and all this kind of stuff. And they threw them all away. And in a way, she's talking about herself. But yeah, he is there for the free ride. He's there for the free ride, the free room and board. He's living above the garage. And one of my favorite scenes is when he's there the first night there's a narration, as a lot of films like this have, because it is a bit of a film noir. At least in my opinion, it's a film noir. I think it's considered a film noir. So there's a lot of narration with William Holden. The film starts out with him narrating what's going on, and the film actually starts out at the end. And then
I was going to say we kind of
flashback.
Yeah,
it has one of the most iconic openings where it's William Holden's character dead in a pool, and you're like, oh, how did we get to that point? Guess we're gonna have to wait and see. And we have to wait.
And a dead man's narrating. So
yeah, I always like that whole dead man's narrating thing in movies. I'm like, how is this possible? I mean,
how's he telling the story of? Wait, what?
After how's he doing this even though he's dead? So that's interesting. One of my favorite scenes is, like I said, when he wakes up after the first time he's there, and all of his stuff from his apartment is there, and it's like, and he asks the butler, he's like, "Did you do this?" He's like, "Yeah, I did it for you during the night." And he's like, "Yeah, I kind of prepared this like yesterday afternoon." And he's like, How did you know I was going to stay?" And it's like, a lot of this seems a lot of pre-planned. You know what I mean? It's also interesting how when he first got there, he was initially mistaken as some type of coroner, some type of undertaker, because
she has a monkey that died.
Desmond's pet monkey died, and I'm like, oh man, something's not quite right with this scenario here.
It's foreshadowing the future of Michael Jackson.
Yeah, or just foreshadowing the future of William Holden's character and Joe Gillis. It's like, you're gonna end up dead like this monkey.
The monkey didn't rewrite the script well.
Yeah, it's also like, how did this monkey die? Was it an old age? Did she kill it? We don't really know, because as we go along, we realize how complex the Norma Desmond character is, how self-dangerous she is as well. There's a whole aspect of this film where we find out that she has tried to commit suicide a few times. There are no locks on any doors. There's no doorknobs on any doors, because the butler pretty much said, yeah, she tried to take her life a few times. We can't have any of that stuff around.
But we find out also that the butler actually is her ex-husband.
Yeah, and we find out a lot of things. This screenplay is just incredibly well done and layered, and they put and when they add new things to it, it all makes it flesh out even more. Later on in the film, when William Holden's character is getting farther and farther down this track of like, I can't take it anymore, we get this revelation that the Erich von Stroheim character, the butler of Max is his name, is he used to be her first husband, but he was also the director that got her started. She directed, I believe he said, 6 of her pictures. And what is interesting is that Erich von Stroheim was a director himself. He directed a lot of silent pictures. He actually directed Gloria Swanson in some pictures. And we see when she is showing William Holden her old pictures, that is one of the pictures that Stroheim directed her in. So it's kind of very interesting how that's also a commentary on that, because Erich von Stroheim is also kind of forgotten as a director. I wouldn't know who he is if I hadn't watched this film and knew who he was, and knew that he directed a lot of silent films in Russia. One of the most famous and well-known silent films from him is is Greed, which came out in 1924. And this was during the whole Russian Revolution and Stalin and Lenin and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so we get that as a commentary as well.
There's also a scene where they're playing cards, and there's a few other silent film
Yeah,
people in that scene.
Buster Keaton is in that scene as well. Someone who was also a huge star in the silent era. But when talkies kind of came around, he kind of went away. I mean, I think there's also a reference to Charlie Chaplin in this film. The Gloria Swanson character, Norma Desmond, liked to put on kind of performances, almost vaudevillian-esque performances for Joe Gillis, just to keep him interested and keep him around. And one of them is she performed Charlie Chaplin's The Tramp. And another thing where Charlie Chaplin, at that time, around 1950, he would end up kind of being exiled from Hollywood and exiled from the United States because of his political leanings and stuff like that. You know, the whole blacklisting. He wasn't quite blacklisted, but, you know, he was, you know, exiled, if you will. You know, when Hollywood wants to get rid of you, they can get rid of you. They will just not give you any work. You know, that's essentially how it goes. But yeah, there's a lot of references to that. And there's also, I think, a lot of it within the Gloria Swanson character. That's the most obvious, the most plain as day. You know, she is very much a product of the Hollywood era. And I have this kind of theory, but it's kind of this idea I have that she is the way she is because of what Hollywood did to her. You know what I mean? Hollywood made her this giant star, made her this super egotistical type person, and that she couldn't cope with not being that. So you end up getting this psychosis that breeds a lot of self-destructive ways, like trying to commit suicide and stuff like that. And the film is just packed with so many themes like that. And it's really just entirely unique, especially for the time. You know, for this film to be made today, it would make sense. But for 1950, with backing from Paramount Pictures, which is also featured in the movie, it kind of blows my mind. It kind of blows my mind.
Let me tell you this. Some info on that, though, is that apparently Billy Wilder and his writing partner only fed a little bit of pages at a time to the studio, and they were also kind of giving them like fake shit. Like they were like, the stuff they were giving them was not really what they were filming. So they kind of lied to the studio about the movie they were making, and that's how they got it made.
And yeah, I was under in the trivia on IMDb for Sunset Boulevard. They also said that Paramount Pictures was all for it. They let him shoot. They let him shoot at Paramount. They had Cecil B. DeMille, who was one of the biggest directors, not only at that time but freaking ever. You know, they let him be in the movie. He had to have, you know, a $10,000 fee. Of course, you know, he doesn't come cheap. They wanted Hedy Lamarr to be in the film as well, because at the time Cecil B. DeMille was filming Samson and Delilah with Hedy Lamarr and Victor Mature, I believe, and that's the film he's actually, I guess, filming while they're in that scene when Norma Desmond goes to Paramount Pictures. It's a very interesting scene. It's a scene that resonates a lot with me because it's like you go back to your old haunt, your old stomping grounds, the place that you had your best memories of your life, and things aren't quite the way they used to be, but in your mind, you're having like flashbacks of the way they used to be. So she goes there, she meets with Cecil B. DeMille, who she worked with as well during the prime of her life, prime of her career. And, you know, one of the lighting guys recognizes her, and he flashes the light on her, and everybody everybody recognizes her. Oh, that's Norma Desmond. That's Norma Desmond. Some guy said, "Oh, I thought she's dead." Yeah, I thought she was dead. I think like the assistant to DeMille was like, Norma Desmond's here to see you. She must be 100. And then DeMille's like, if she's 100, then what does that make me? And it's really funny. And the way DeMille treats Norma Desmond, I find to be fascinating as well. He treats her as if she's a child. Oh yeah, we'll look at your script. Oh, I saw it. It's interesting. It's got some good things. Here, sit down over here. We'll talk about this stuff and da 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 da. And that's the way you kind of treat a child. You just kind of you got to treat them with kid gloves. And it's very interesting how people recognize her condition. It's really ultimately sad as well because this is a woman who was once like a huge star. She made Paramount Pictures as successful that it could be, so that it survived to that day. And now she's kind of gone. She's gone. She's forgotten, and she doesn't quite understand the passage of time. And that happened. That happens not only with this fictionalized Norma Desmond character, but it happens with a lot of stars, and a lot of stars at that time. This happened to Mary Pickford was someone who was a huge star in the silent era. She was a very famous actress, and she was kind of a recluse at that time. Howard Hughes was another person, big name. He was making movies and all this stuff, and then he just went away, kind of hid away, and kind of was inside his own head. And this happens with a lot of child stars as well. How many times do we hear about the tragic end to a child star, the way they're kind of used when they're a kid and then forgotten when they're adults? Their career disappears, their money disappears. Perhaps they have drug issues or alcohol problems and stuff like that. And this film is very much commenting on all of that stuff in 1950. So it's very contemporary. So that's why I think it's essential, because it's an all-time movie. It's commenting on just a wide range of things that still happen today.
Yeah, and of course, getting to the kind of the finale of this movie.
Yeah. As we progress.
Yeah, William Holden finally is deciding to
can't take
it anymore. She's trying to like make him the next husband, which he does not want to be. And literally, there's a New Year's Eve party, and there's nobody else coming, and it's just them two. And then he finally decides he's going to leave, and she's talking about killing herself, and he's like, "You're not going to do it. I don't care."
Yeah, because she tried to do it earlier. That New Year's Eve party, he stormed out on her, and he gets back there, and she tried to kill herself. So that's when he ultimately says, "I have to stay because this woman's going to kill herself."
Yeah,
and that's when he becomes more of her boy toy, if you will. He's probably doing a lot of things off screen that we are not privy to, because it is 1950. You can get away with only so many things on screen, but there's a lot of moments where you can see that the relationship has become more of a couple, a romantic relationship or fomantic relationship than
one-sided.
One-sided affair, if you will. And meanwhile, he's kind of having this budding romance with that the woman who was the reader from earlier in the film. He keeps running into her. She is actually engaged to his friend Artie Green, who is that assistant director who's now off in New Mexico shooting a Western, shocker, or Arizona. I think he's off in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is shooting a Western. And I'm trying to remember the name of the girl.
Well, they start writing a script together.
Yeah, her name is Betty Schaefer. She wants him to write this script together because she sees something in one of his old scripts that he can actually take and turn into an entire new script, and it would be good. She's trying to get him actually to write more about real life stuff than just nonsense Hollywood stuff that he, like you commented, that he was trying to write before. So they're meeting secretly at night because he can't. Norma Desmond is in such a fragile mental state that she probably couldn't handle him doing something that didn't involve her. So he's sneaking off at night. She gets suspicious of this. She kind of figures it out, and that is when we get to this whole climax of the film where she ends up shooting him 3 times. I believe twice in the back and once in the stomach. And he ends up falling in the pool, and he's spread eagle and face down, and that is where the cops are called, and they come and they see the situation, and that's when we get this very fascinating ending, this very just interesting ending, one of the most interesting endings I've seen in a film in a while, where the butler character basically has to pretend that she's on a movie set in order to get her to leave the house, to get her to actually just leave her room to come downstairs. He has to pretend that Cecil B. DeMille is here and the cameras are ready, the lights are ready. You know, this is the movie that you wanted to make, and it's just, and the looks in her eyes at some moments of this film, especially as deep her psychosis goes, is just frightening. Like she has
Yeah,
these looks in her, her eyes are wide open, bug-eyed,
I
and
feel like Nicolas Cage channels her from this movie, like the bug eyes that Nicolas Cage does in his movies. I feel like he channels her from this movie.
and then she'll just start moving her head like ever so slightly around, and it's just, and you can tell there's something not right, and it's kind of scary. You know, there's a point in this film where she tries to have a bunch of not plastic surgery, but all kind of beauty remedies done on her face to try to get prepared for this film that we all know is not happening, but she thinks it's going to happen. And by the end of this film, she's just completely out of it mentally, and she comes down the stairs. And there's actually a cameo in that moment with Hedda Hopper, who was a famous kind of a gossip columnist at the time, Hedda Hopper, and she makes a cameo in the film at that point, and I always found it incredible is as she's walking over, going down the stairs, everybody stops. It's almost as if the whole world stops, and it's just her that's moving. I always find it very just fascinating to me. I don't know if that was purposely done, or to make it look that way, but it just feels like the whole world's moving in slow motion and she's moving. And then she gets down to the bottom of the stairs, and you get that famous shot of, I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille. And she walks towards the camera, and it gets all fuzzy and basically fades to white, and that's the end. And it's a hell of a movie, man. We're not doing it justice by just explaining it. You have to watch it, even if you've already seen it. Watch it again, because I find it actually very rewatchable because it's that solid of a movie. But man, yeah, it's one of my personal favorites. I know Steven likes it. Yeah, you have any final thoughts to say about this hell of a movie?
Yeah, this was a film that did get nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Did not win, but didn't William Holden win for the movie though?
I'll say this: this was a stacked year at that Oscars, because a film we already talked about was nominated as well that year, and that was All About Eve. That's the same year. So All About Eve, the nominees for that year, Best Picture, were All About Eve, Born Yesterday, Father of the Bride, King Solomon's Mines, and Sunset Boulevard. All About Eve ended up winning the Best Picture that year. For Best Actress, which Gloria Swanson was nominated for but did not win. This is when Judy Holliday won for Born Yesterday, but you had Anne Baxter and Bette Davis from All About Eve as well, so it was a stacked year. It only ended up winning 3.
It's one of and that doesn't of course amount to much in most people's minds, and it doesn't really to me either. But it is one that it's like one of them ones. It's like it's kind of almost like the 1994 that we always talk about, where you had a lot of great films, and it's like you always debate which one should have maybe won over the other. And it's kind of funny, thinking back to All About Eve, which kind of comments on a lot of the same things that this movie does, in the sense of like age, actresses that are past their time a little bit, dealing with that. I think it's interesting that two of them movies kind of came out in the same year.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. How they're both criticisms of certain industries and how they treat their older actresses. One being the theater in All About Eve, and the other one being straight up Hollywood in the Sunset Boulevard.
An interesting double feature. Yeah,
it's a hell of a double feature. I mean, you have some powerhouse acting in this film. William Holden did not win Best Actor. He lost out to Jose Ferrer for Cyrano de Bergerac. But that year, you also had Lewis Calhern for The Magnificent Yankee, Harvey, James Stewart and Harvey, which is a great performance in that film. Great film as well. And Spencer Tracy in Father of the Bride. So that is also a very stacked name year. like big names: William Holden, James Stewart, Spencer Tracy. You know,
But, but really the big champion for me of this is Billy Wilder, because him and his direction and his script, he's one of the all-time great directors of all time. And I think we've talked about him already on this in this series before, haven't we? Haven't we done another one of his movies?
Yes, we've done Double Indemnity, which was him.
So I mean, he's
him as well. Yeah,
he's an all-time great. That you have to check out his stuff. I mean, it's his scripts or his dialogue is so quick and smart for that time. Especially a Double Indemnity too. Like that, the humor in that movie got me. You know, the quick-witted humor. But it's Sunset Boulevard is a definite, guys. If you're getting into classic films, it's one of the first ones you should watch, because it really it's aged really well, and it's still got things to say that still speak to today. So it's a perfect classic film to get into.
I think Billy Wilder is the most accessible for modern audiences to get into. I mean, just the 19
that or Hitchcock.
Yeah, them two are both really good, and Howard Hawks as well. But just that, starting off that 1950s string of movies, starting up with Sunset Boulevard. You have, after that, he did Ace in the Hole, Stalag 17, Sabrina, The 7-Year Itch, The Spirit of St. Louis. I mean, Love in the Afternoon, Witness for the Prosecution, Some Like It Hot, and then in 1960 he did The Apartment, which won Best Picture that year. And that's a hell of a decade worth of movies. Man, that's a hell of a string of movies. but yeah,
Sunset Boulevard, definitely essential. You have to watch it. It's. I'm ready for my close-up, guys. Let's do this.
So we'll leave you with all of that to digest. Stephen, where can they find you on this thing called the internet?
Well, I guess they can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Stephen Billings, or Film Club Central, where we post reviews and we talk movies there too. So.
Yeah, you can find me kicking around on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Capzilla Productions. And also, you can find the rest of these videos here on Dan Skip Allen's YouTube channel, Best Damn Movie Show, where we do this series of videos as well as Top 5 Weekly every single week. So yeah, stick around, because there will be a lot more of these videos to come. Later.